Washington is totally broken.
Washington is broken.
Washington right now is broken.
Nothing will get done in Washington this year because Washington is broken.
For years now, politicians have been telling the American public that they can't deliver their campaign promises because of the gridlock in Washington. But with so much at stake, from healthcare to education to Social Security, it seems there is more than just ideological differences standing in the way of social progress. At times, it seems like the whole system is set up to fail. But two researchers are claiming that the industry that spent $6.5 billion in 2016 and $5.73 billion in 2018 is flourishing.
The parties, the political industrial complex, which works very well together in one particular way, and that is to rig the rules of the game, to protect themselves jointly from new competition. Politics isn't broken, it's fixed.
A movement has been growing across the country to change how the system works. Places like Maine, San Francisco, and Santa Fe are changing the way their representatives are chosen to allow voters to rank their preferences instead of choosing only one representative. Initial surveys of ranked choice voting in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Cambridge show voters are more satisfied with the conduct of local campaigns than in similar cities with plurality, winner-takes-all, voting. Could ranked choice voting save Washington? In 2002, the late Senator John McCain campaigned to support instant runoff voting, also known as ranked choice voting.
Hello, this is Senator John McCain. I'm calling to urge your support for Ballot Measure 1 on August 27th. Ballot Measure 1 will adopt a fairer voting method. It will lead to good government because Alaska will elect leaders who have the support of a majority of voters.
And that same year, then Senator Barack Obama introduced SB 1789 that would have created instant runoff voting for Congress and state primaries, as well as authorized it for local elections. Ranked choice voting is an alternative way for citizens to vote for who they would like to represent them in office.
You pick your favorite, just like always. But then if you want, you can also say, this is my second choice, my third choice, my fourth choice, and my least favorite choice. The polls close, and now all the first place votes are counted. And if that candidate has a true majority, meaning over 50%, well, the election's over and that candidate wins. But if after the first place votes are counted, none of the five has over 50%, then the candidate that is in last place is automatically eliminated from the race, and voters who had selected that candidate first now have their second place votes counted instead. We rerun the totals, and you continue on that process until the election produces a true majority winner. Meaning we're always going to elect the candidate with the broadest appeal to the most number of voters.
You could vote for me as your number one, knowing that you could vote for Hillary Clinton or whoever your safety is as your number two.
Researchers Catherine Gale and Michael Porter claim Democratic and Republican candidates have no incentive to work towards societal greater good because they're beholden to the party more than their constituents. Instead, they argue, the parties are operating in a duopoly, prohibiting independent candidates from achieving success, creating a formula that rotates different figureheads and limits opportunities for innovation.
A duopoly is an industry where there are two dominant competitors. And in the politics industry, we of course have the Democrats and the Republicans as our two dominant rivals.
Think of Coke and Pepsi as mentioned in a recent Freakonomics podcast episode. It's in their best interest for Dr. Pepper never to gain the notoriety of the other two soda brands.
The Democrats and Republicans, they are a combined duopoly. I mean, they dominate this space. There's a reason why people like Mike Bloomberg, Howard Schultz, and whoever else you can name that's considered running as an independent has not run. You can call it unfair, but that's just the way our political system, that's what it's turned into now.
You're looking for a perfect process. That's not what democracy is. And if you're looking for everyone to come out a winner, that's also not what democracy is. It's not Junior League T-ball where everybody gets a prize. There are winners and losers. And how you vote shapes who wins and who loses.
In today's climate, there's incentives for people to be partisan. And every single move is being tracked. Every word they say from the time, even before they announce a president, is being tracked recorded, monitored. It's impossible to try and subtly change your way halfway through a campaign. You're going to get called out on it.
And many of these call-outs are done by members of the candidates' own parties.
The vice president has still failed to acknowledge that it was wrong to take the position that he took at that time.
If you want to do well running for office in a ranked choice voting election, and you want supporters of other candidates to rank you as their second choice, then there's an incentive to be a little nicer to those candidates and maybe not attack them.
The idea that somehow elections are going to get less rancorous, that's just not going to happen. We are in a state in this country where people have fundamental disagreements about very important issues. That's not going to change just because you change the way candidates are chosen in the voting process.
Ranked choice voting is compelling for a number of reasons. I think in today's politics, its most compelling is to just allow us to have more than two choices, to allow new players to sort of enter the marketplace of ideas and to be considered and evaluated and voted upon for what they're saying and what they're offering, rather than the sort of the horse race partisan impact of what they might mean for splitting votes and so on.
The third-party candidate ultimately just siphons off votes. A third-party candidate ultimately undermines the nominee of a particular party. And in this case, if it's the Green Party running a third-party candidacy, it will have the same impact that it did in 2016, or when Al Gore ran and Ralph Nader was the spoiler in that race. A third-party candidacy is a spoiler.
I want to see an alternative political party. These two political parties are telling millions of Americans they have nowhere to go. And people don't like choices like Tweedledum, Tweedledee.
If you have more choices and more opportunity for new players to get in the arena, that can ultimately create better products for consumers. And I think that's the same basic dynamic in politics.
Gale and Porter argue that candidates and elected officials may be able to get bipartisan laws passed, but there is no reward for not supporting the party, because if you vote against the party line, you won't receive their support in the next election. Ranked choice voting would change that, because voters can be more or less supportive of elected officials based on their actions, not just their policies and positions.
If you solve anything in a bipartisan way, you likely won't make it back through your primary.
What a lot of crap. You know, I hear that argument from so many Democrats and Republicans that they say they're getting burned at home because they're working across the aisle. They're not working across the aisle, they're posturing. Right? I've never seen a politician lose an election because they built a bipartisan coalition and accomplished something. I think they do lose credibility when they show themselves to be hypocrites.
And in a political climate where there's no reward for coming in second, the party's support can make or break a candidate.
Imagine a market where you as an emerging business could only make your first dollar when you were the biggest company in that market, right? So that you can't grow. Like if you start off at 10%, you're making nothing, 20% you're still making nothing, 30% you're making nothing. Finally get up to 40% or whatever it is, and you can actually make all the money, right? Or something like that, right? But it's like really hard. So the market is very duopolistic that way.
When you look behind the scenes, we find that Democrats and Republicans work very well together in one particular way, and that is to cooperate, some would say collude, to set rules and practices that protect the industry from themselves, that protect themselves jointly from new competition.
That's one of the reasons Maine chose to adopt ranked choice voting.
Then you have the state of Maine, which is, for us, a thrilling story. It's a state that has advanced ranked choice voting first at the local level. Then they have moved in, they used it for congressional elections on all their primaries in 2018, and now they've adopted it for president.
Maine, as you know, last year, so in the 2018 election, had the first federal election ever, a congressional race, using the ranked choice voting system. That race shows why ranked choice voting is not a good idea. The candidate who got the largest number of votes, the largest plurality in the first round of tabulations, did not actually win the race. And because there were multiple rounds of tabulation, apparently thousands of ballots cast by voters were thrown out.
However, supporters of the process claim it gives more power to the voters by making votes for third-party candidates count when the tally moves to an instant runoff. Think of the duopoly example of Coke and Pepsi. Just because a voter prefers Dr. Pepper, it doesn't mean that he or she doesn't want soda at all. This change in the process challenges the duopoly of the two parties and reforms the industry. Opponents argue that this requires too much of the voter.
You talk to the average voter about this, and I think the average voter has the same feelings that former California Governor Jerry Brown has. They find ranked choice voting to be confusing and overcomplicated.
Virtually without exception. It's been a very positive, supportive reaction from voters saying, I liked this better than what I did before. The very strongest support is from people under 40 who are not sort of used to a single choice ballot. And they're like, of course this is better to be able to rank rather than vote for one.
According to an exit poll conducted by the Bangor Daily News in Maine, over 74% of people said ranking choices was either somewhat easy or very easy. In the U.S., it's been used in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Santa Fe, with 5 new cities using it in November 2019.
And then the fact that you can't get elected for president next year without winning or competing for electoral votes in Maine, and you won't be elected for president without learning something about ranked choice voting because you have to win in Maine.
Other countries, like Australia and Ireland, use a version of ranked choice voting. And while some claim the process favors progressive ideals, the Conservative Prime Minister Scott Morrison won re-election in Australia.
All of these rules, practices, and norms have been created outside of the Constitution, and therefore the good news is that as dysfunctional as so much of this politics industry is, it's invented, and we, the citizens, can force changes in that invention.